quorum. That is correct.
All right, well, we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, Commissioners, City staff. I now call this meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission to order. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Parks.
Present.
Commissioner Barraza.
Present.
Commissioner Singh. Commissioner Cummings.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Present.
Commissioner Oputa.
Present.
Commissioner Vang.
Present.
Vice Chair Dolan.
Here.
And Chair McCoy.
Present. Thank you. We will now begin the Pledge of Allegiance. Will everyone please stand and unmute themselves? Ready, salute. I
pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and
and
justice for all.
Thank you. We will start with the approval of the agenda. Secretary, are there any changes to the agenda?
I have not received any changes to the agenda.
Okay, are there any other proposed changes to the agenda? Yes, no.
Appears to be none at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Commissioner Oputa.
Thank you, Commissioner Oputa. Thank you, Commissioner Barraza, for the second. Secretary, please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Parks.
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza.
Yes.
Commissioner Singh, absent. Commissioner Cummings.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Oputa.
Yes.
Commissioner Vang.
Yes.
Vice Chair Dolan.
Yes.
And Chair McCoy.
Yes. We will move on to the next item, approval of minutes for November 1st, 2021 and November 15th, 2021. Are there any changes to the minutes of November 1st or November 15th?
The clerk's office did not receive any changes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dolan. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Dr. Oputa. Secretary, please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Parks.
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza.
Yes.
Commissioner Singh. Yes. Commissioner Singh has arrived at 5:34. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cummings.
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Oputa.
Yes.
Commissioner Vang.
Yes.
Vice Chair Dolan.
Yes.
And Chair McCoy.
Yes. We will now move on to subcommittee reports. This item is a discussion item for the commission and no public comments will be taken related to this item. Does the Cultural Arts Plan Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to the commission?
Chair, there's no updates. We're still receiving applicants, so there's no update for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vang. Does the Highest Needs Neighborhood Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission? No, I'll go ahead and give it. No, there's no updates that we would like to provide at this time. Does the Parks Master Plan Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission?
No update at this time.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dolan. We will now move on to the member reports and comments. As a reminder, this is a time for commission members to report anything they feel important for the public or commission to know, but it's not a time for a discussion. Commissioner Barraza, do you have any reports or comments you would like to make?
I just wanted to make a quick observation. I was able to listen to the presentation to the Fresno City Council on the highest needs definition. And it's something that wasn't clearly defined was what it's called the shovel-ready facilities. And there were some facilities that had not been mentioned. And some of the facilities I'm thinking about is where the city owns vacant land and applications for funding have been filed. And actually, those sites would be shovel-ready because the CEQA procedures are normally completed. So I just wanted to make that observation, and I know the item is coming back on next Thursday, and I hope staff is able to clarify that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barraza. Commissioner Miller, do you have any reports or comments for this commission?
Do not, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Cummings, do you have any reports or comments for this commission?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Apuda, do you have any reports or comments for this commission tonight?
Yes, I have a few comments. One, I just want to clarify something. The motion to approve the minutes, was that for both sets of minutes? So we had two sets that needed to be approved.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you. Two things then. One, at our last meeting, as you will notice in the agenda, I asked for it to be put on the agenda for us to have a conversation regarding how do we address community members' questions when they are presented. That didn't show on the agenda. I did send a request out. Was it possible to add it to the agenda? So I'd like to ask again if that can be put on a future agenda to discuss a clear process when community members present questions to us, that their questions are answered in an appropriate manner.
Thank you, Dr. Apuda. I do believe there was an email that was sent out to all commissioners in regards to that. So I believe that's why it did not get on the agenda tonight.
I missed that. Thank you. I'll look for it.
I believe, Dr. Apuda, I believe that came from Brianna, city clerk.
Okay.
Was
I'll
the
take a
city
look for that.
attorney.
That email actually came from me, Christy Costa.
Oh,
City
I'm
Attorney.
sorry. Thank
That's
you,
okay.
Chris.
Okay. Thank you. I'll look for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The other thing, I think last week, I sent an email to you, Chair McCoy, and to city staff regarding an upcoming webinar that I think would be of interest to our commissioners, and asked if that could be sent out to commissioners. The webinar is around safe routes to parks and healthy retail. It's going to be on I have no skin in the game. Someone just told me about it, and it seems like it's directly related to our work. It's Thursday the 9th from 12 to 1. And just to give you a sense of the learning objectives, it's how safe routes to parks and healthy retail support individual and community health, barriers to park access and advance equity, inclusivity for people of all ages and ability, improve transportation planning and safety, and on and on. So I'd like to ask again, I did send that to city staff and to our chair, whether or not that information can go out to all the commissioners, if that's appropriate.
Thank you. Christy, quick question. Is that something that we can send out to all commissioners that Dr. Apuda just mentioned?
Yes, we advised Dr. Apuda to go ahead and make a presentation so that the public could have access to that same information. And if the commission members would like a copy of what she provided city staff, then they can go ahead and contact Aldi, and she'll be able to provide that to them.
Can you advise me in what method? Because again, I didn't see that, and I looked for a response.
I believe Aldi emailed you last week.
Okay, thanks. I'll look for that too. So I guess my presentation I just did will stand. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dolan, do you have any reports or comments you have for the commission?
Comments only, and it is, I hope it's appropriate, a belated happy Thanksgiving to all of my fellow commissioners and the city staff that supports us. I just want to say, even in the midst of a rather chaotic Thanksgiving, I did take a moment and feel gratitude for all the work that we're doing here and for the city staff that support us. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vane, do you have any reports or comments for the commission?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Parks, do you have any reports or comments for the commission?
Just a quick comment, and along the lines of Commissioner Barraza's comments, I also watched the City Council meeting section related to the highest needs neighborhood assessment. And my takeaway was that there seems to be some confusion about how much of Measure P funding goes towards the highest needs neighborhoods. And in fact, I believe Councilmember Maxwell asked for the specific dollar amount, which wasn't available at the moment. So I would just encourage city staff to be prepared with that information so that it's very clear what the highest needs neighborhood amount would be annually to help this city council make the best decision possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Commissioner Singh, do you have any reports or comments?
I do. I wanted to make a comment in regards to the American Rescue Plan community survey that was put out by the city of Fresno. This survey is intended to help collect community input to help determine the types of investments the community would like to see. I noticed, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I assume that some of the American Rescue Plan funds can be used towards parks, park infrastructure, and if not that, at least the roads that go to the parks and whatnot. I noticed that some of the categories within that survey, there's multiple categories of funding that are jumbled together, that are coupled together that could be separate, should be separate, so community input can be clear and concise. I'm not sure. And also in the survey itself, I would like to see a little more items, or I guess more categories, or a specific category for parks, because I do know that some of the American Rescue Plan funds can be used towards park infrastructure, and so it would be nice to have that incorporated in there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. I can't see everyone on my screen here, so did I miss any other commissioners wanting to make reports or comments? I do apologize for that. All right, we will now move on to city administration and park staff reports and comments. Does anyone from the administration have any reports or comments for the commission?
Well, good evening, everybody. I think two of the commissioners have already talked about the workshop that we presented to council last week on the highest needs neighborhood. This will be returning to council for a vote on this Thursday. So I just wanted to remind everybody, if you wanted to check in, that it will be on Thursday.
Thank you. Does anyone from the park staff have any reports or comments for the commission?
I do. Aldi Ramirez, good evening, commissioner members, assistant director for the Parks Department. I just wanted to communicate that both city staff as well as WRT and team have been hard at work to prepare the Measure P website as well as the survey that will be coming out in English, Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi. So we are super, super close to getting that launched. I know Commissioner Parks reached out. And we should be anticipating that that goes live this week. And once it does, I will communicate that out via email so that you all have the link to get there. And then you can share that with your networks as well.
Thank you. We will now move on to unscheduled and scheduled communication. Would any member of the public like to speak on any issue within the jurisdiction of this commission? You have 3 minutes.
If any members of the public would like to speak, please raise your digital hand and we will call you as your hands are raised. Any member of the public would like to speak, please raise your hand. All right. Here we go. Now our first speaker is Anthony Molina.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is Anthony Molina, and I am the chair of the Fresno County Bicycle Coalition. And I want to thank Commissioner Apuda for sharing with you the information about the webinar this week on the safe routes to parks and healthy retail. We appreciate sharing this innovative program with the Fresno community, which is based on the Walk Sacramento's initiative that is collaborating with the Fresno or the Sacramento County Public Health Department to develop a toolkit to analyze and develop safe routes to parks and healthy retail. So it's the beauty of this program, I should say, is that it actually uses CalFresh dollars. So it wouldn't, if something like this, we'd like to suggest that be considered in Fresno, is that it wouldn't necessarily use Measure P dollars to help identify and develop safe routes to parks. So as a member of the Fresno County Bicycle Coalition, we're very concerned about access to parks. And so this presentation is co-sponsored with the U.S. Green Building Council of Central California. So we hope you will all consider joining us. I know it conflicts with the city council meeting, which is really important, but it's noontime. So if there's a noon break in between the city council meeting on Thursday, welcome everybody to attend. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Glenna Gamel. Hold on 1 second. What version is Zoom? Glenna, okay, I'm gonna have to. All right. Glenna, are you able to speak now?
She's muted.
Can you unmute yourself, Glenna? All right, Glenna, you're live.
Okay, I was wondering, with the safe ways to parks and healthy shopping, is that so, there's not like all these people shooting and doing this and doing that at the malls and stuff? Is that what that means?
This is actually a time for the council, for the commission to hear your comments and not necessarily to respond.
Oh, okay. And like the city admissions, what are they doing about the park thing with that?
And I'd like to reiterate this. Unscheduled communication is a time for people to speak to the council. They can briefly respond back, but it's very difficult without violating the Brown Act.
Oh, okay. I was just kind of wondering what, some of this that they've talked about earlier, because some of it I hadn't heard before. And, but I think that's a good idea if they have some kind of safe ways, to the parks for healthy shopping, so people don't have to be scared of everything.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, City Clerk, do we have anyone else in the public wanting to make a comment?
There are, yes, Carla Martinez. And I will unmute you now. All right, Carla, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Carla Martinez, you can unmute yourself. Hello, Carla. If you are listening, it's your turn to speak, and you can unmute yourself, please. All right, looks like we're having some technical...
Hi.
Oh, there she
Sorry,
is.
I was having a little trouble with that. Just wanted to make a quick comment on 21-963. Just want to ask the commission today to provide more investments for parks in Southwest Fresno as well as Southeast Fresno. I am a policy advocate for Leadership Council, and we often hear from residents in these areas that they need more parks, more green space, and just more healthy spaces to be in. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
All right, City Clerk, do we have anyone else in the public wanting to make a comment?
Let's see. Cesar Casamayor. And Cesar, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. First and foremost, peace to everybody. Thank you for having the meeting to hear the comments of the community. But it'll be better if the questions that we raise should be answered. I want to start by saying that I go to the parks. I use Romaine Park a lot. I go to Melody Park. I go to the park, Martin Riley Park. I take my children. I play basketball there. And one of the continuous things that we've seen is the poor lack of engagement of community. I understand that there's community centers, and a lot of times where I have dropped off my children, I felt that at homes has been great. The upgrade have been great, and I hope it continues. But I also do understand that staff are not really being given enough opportunity to give input on some of the improvements they would like to see in the parks. From my understanding of some of the basic staff people there. I also understand that the approaches of engagement that have been presented to community are mostly and sometimes solely based on nonprofit organizations. And I think that there's a big gap missing from those, and many of us that use the parks every day, but don't really know what's going on in the parks and ways of making improvement, so having a say-so because of the way that community is being engaged is very lacking, like engagement. I also want to say that in regards of having better mental health opportunities for community to be accessing in diverse ways of approaching and practicing mindfulness activities, there should be better cultural competent inclusion for various communities. And I hope that there is actual funding put into continue to be able to expand on the acknowledgement of different cultures, from hip hop to geographical by land, from Cambodian, Hmong, and so forth, different communities. So I say that to say this to end is that I hope that the ways of engagement for those of us that use the parks for either breakdancing or for playing basketball or for just taking our kids to use the programs, there should be better ways of creating engagement in the community to really have a voice. Because many times the ones that do speak, like myself, who is a community organizer, are the ones that are speaking for those when we say voice. And so I hope that you guys take this into account, that there's many missed opportunities of engaging community at the park that use it. It's just that there's not enough relationship with staff and community. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. And there are no more hands.
Thank you. We will now move on to workshops. Workshops are for informational purposes only, and we will not be taking public comment regarding any workshop. Item number 21-971 workshop, cost of operations and maintenance of existing City of Fresno parks and improvements. Will staff or WRT please begin the workshop?
Good evening, Commission members. Aldi Ramirez, Assistant Director in the Parks Department. I would like to give the floor to John Gibbs to introduce Mike with Pros Consulting.
Excellent. And with that, let me just introduce Mike and some of the importance of this item as it relates very much to this ongoing work of the commission to understand parks, and in particular to understand how parks are maintained, the cost of maintaining parks. As we were working on the master plan adopted in 2018, there was an important issue of just lack of resources to maintain and operate the park system. And thank goodness today with Measure P, we're providing some of that critical funding. You all and taxpayers in Fresno are providing some of that critical funding. But Mike Svets brings a really important perspective. He worked with us on that master plan, developed operational guidance, did benchmarking, understood the cost of doing business, the cost of maintaining a park. And everybody found that to be really important because that was actually really one of the important things that we were solving for in the park system. So we wanted to use tonight's forum just as an important educational background for you all on the commission and to the members of the public that have joined as well. And for Mike to just talk through that process. He brings that expertise working nationally. He brings the expertise of knowing Fresno and having met closely with the Parks Department and countless community meetings across the city. I think just brings an important understanding. So he's going to have a short presentation, and then we'll be certainly available for many questions. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Thank you all. Very much appreciate the opportunity to share information with you this evening. As John said, my name is Mike Svets. I'm a principal with Pros Consulting. I also affectionately refer to myself as a recovering Parks and Recreation Director. So I did sit on staff side of the table for 20 odd years. And, I think that, one of the big takeaways or a couple of big takeaways for you tonight, even before I have the ability to share my screen and then run through the presentation is, number one, I think it's critically important for you all to recognize and to continue to ask questions that if you build something, what is it going to cost? And not just what it's going to cost to build or what that capital improvement is, but what that total cost is. That is going to be a very much paramount to ensuring that you have financial sustainability of your park system as you go forward. So let me see if I don't quite yet have the ability to share my screen.
Just 1 second there, we'll get you that ability.
Sure, no problem.
All right, you should be able to now share your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And so again, as John said, this is really informational. This is not a point in time in which we're making decisions, but to kind of understand the magnitude of where we were and, as John mentioned, where we're going or where there's a huge need to go with regards to Measure P funding as we go forward. So let me pull this up full screen. I am going to save a little bit of bandwidth on my side and kill my video there for a second. So as you know, Measure P is multifaceted in terms of what is it intended to fund, but it's not 46% of it is really about managing and maintaining your existing park system. And you can see there in the kind of the pie and the offset of that pie that greater than $5 million is dedicated to just park maintenance as a result of Measure P. And we're going to walk through with you the reasoning as to why that number is what it is. So as I was saying before, it's critically important to view parks through the lens of being an investment in your quality of life, in the experiences, the positive experiences that residents have in your park system. But when we look at it through the lens of dollars and funding, you know, oftentimes we talk about the investment that's made. Capital investment is that one-time dollar that's made to improve something or expand something or build something new. But that is one-time money, and there are potentially a lot of funding sources that you can potentially tap from a one-time investment. From Measure P to grants to sponsorships, you name it. You have the ability to utilize a vast majority of investment funding strategies to make that capital investment happen. But one of the key critical components is to recognize that capital investments don't last forever, and that they all have an intended useful life. This is no different than a vehicle. This is no different than your house. You have ongoing, you have an understanding of how long anything is expected to last, whether it's a roof, windows, you know, heating and cooling units. And in order to reach that useful life, you have to put some operations and maintenance into that. You have to put some ongoing dollars into those capital investments in order to reach their useful life. I use this analogy when we were talking to the public during the master plan. It's kind of like buy a new car, but don't have enough money to change the oil. That car is not going to last you very long. And it's the same thing when we talk about parks. You have to have operations and maintenance dollars to manage and maintain the investment so that it reaches its useful life. The other key component, though, is to recognize that anything that you build has a useful life. And another way to say it is that it is not going to last forever. So it's important to recognize that though you do have dollars through Measure P, we have to continually update and do life cycle replacement in a park system. Another big key takeaway here is that life cycle replacement in a park system never stops. It happens into perpetuity. There are going to be years in which you have a greater funding need for life cycle replacement, and other years that maybe you'll have less. But you will always have life cycle replacement as part of a park system. So the total cost of ownership is to recognize these three components and understand what that looks like at the time something's put in the ground, what the ongoing every year annual costs are to manage and maintain that asset, and then how long that asset is intended to last, and the expected life cycle replacement cost to that asset. So as I was just kind of alluding to, parks have value. And I think we oftentimes look at parks through the lens of having intrinsic, adding to quality of life value. But parks, no different than utilities or roads, traffic signals, street lights, are made up of a bunch of assets. And in many cases, assets that are below the ground, utilities, irrigation systems, but they are a built environment within green space. And you can see here on the screen just a smattering of different built environment assets. All of these assets have a cost to put in. All of these assets have a cost that to manage and maintain them annually. And all of them, in some cases, pieces and parts of them will have a life cycle replacement cost at a varying timeline schedule. So This is an information that was derived through the analysis that we worked on with city staff as part of the Parks Master Plan. So the existing value, not including the land of the park system at the time that we did this plan, was close to $300 million. So whether that infrastructure was put in by taxpayer dollars or grants, the asset value of your park system is around $300 million. The combined city maintenance budget to manage $300 million worth of assets across 1,100 park acres was $10 million annually. Your direct cost per acre maintenance cost was $2,500 per acre. As you compare that to the Northern California average, your costs, what you were inputting into operating and maintaining your system was approximately $2,500 per acre. The Northern California average was $7,000 to $11,000 per acre. So you can see how underfunded the operations and maintenance was. And what this in turn led to was not only did you not have a program in place to replace the assets, the $300 million worth of assets, but you also had below average maintenance of those assets, which meant that those assets were going to quote unquote wear out much sooner than their intended life cycle. At the time that we did the master plan, of your $300 million, you had approximately close to 40% of your entire system was expected to be in need of life cycle replacement over a 10-year period. That's a significant, financial investment, or shall we say reinvestment in your park system. So all of this really works together. So this just kind of underscores the statement that I was making. Your total budget when we were doing in terms of park maintenance, combined public works and the parks department, was $2.75 million. And then you compare that to the average of $7.7 to $11 million, you can see the significant funding gap on the operations side of the equation from a parks maintenance perspective. So this is what I wanted to walk through with you, though, is sometimes I think we oversimplify park maintenance. And what I wanted to share with you when you start thinking about what park maintenance is, that you have kind of a context in terms of how parks and public works approach managing and maintaining public space of this nature. So the first thing is to recognize that it's not just about mowing, blowing, and going, and or just cleaning restrooms. This is just a very holistic list of what we would call the lines of service, or the functions that are performed by park maintenance staff. So you have park and ground maintenance. That is this complete list here. And then you have trades. These are kind of what we would call specialty. This isn't just the basics of mow, blow, and go, and horticulture and managing and maintaining trails. This is where you start getting into the intricacies of park assets. So it could be bridge maintenance, aquatics, park lighting, irrigation, landscape maintenance, and so on and so forth. These are just a few more. You have response teams that are just, in many cases, set up to manage and maintain contracts, or very special things such as pesticide application or integrated pest management. Athletic field maintenance has an entire set of infrastructure or operational functions unto itself. In some cases, these overlap, but in many cases, they tie back to just managing and maintaining athletic fields. And then, of course, you have urban forestry, managing and maintaining trees and a healthy urban canopy is critically important to park maintenance. So the long story short is that parks maintenance isn't just something that you can define by saying they do 5 things. There's a lot that goes into the complexity and the approach to developing work plans across 1,100 acres. When you take these lines of service, then you turn around and take these and break these down even further. The lines of service are kind of the high level playground maintenance, irrigation maintenance. When we talk about maintenance standards, this is where we start talking about the individual tasks and the frequency in which you perform those tasks associated with that line of service or key function. There are typically 3 best practice or highly recognized ways in which you manage and maintain parks through what we call standards. The first is level 1. And of course, as the name kind of says, it's the greatest level of maintenance. It typically means that the tasks that you're performing within the maintenance of a park or of an asset are done fairly frequently or highly frequently. These maintenance level 1 modes are typically done in destination location parks, signature parks, regional parks, parks in which you have a potential revenue offset associated with them. Level 2 standard is kind of the go-to standard. It has a fairly well-defined task list and frequencies, and these are what are typically often applied in what we call the backbone of a park system, which is neighborhood parks and community parks. Maintenance level 3 is kind of very little effort, and you're performing tasks mostly on an as-needed basis. And as you can guess, the term as needed is very subjective, and it's not very well defined. This is typically what you would find in natural areas, open spaces, basin parks. Your park, unfortunately, because of the lack of resources, you are managing and maintaining almost all of your acreage at a level 3 standard because you were only investing approximately $2,500 per acre to manage your system. When we take this a step further, this is just an example of what maintenance standards kind of look like. So you have restrooms kind of at a level 2. These are the tasks, and then this is the frequency around which you perform each of these tasks for every restroom in your system. Playgrounds. Now, playgrounds, yes, they're found throughout almost all parks, but this is one of these that, irregardless of the park, that you're managing and maintaining playgrounds against a National Playground Safety Institute safety standard. And so these are typically performed or should be performed at a level 1 standard, part and parcel because of the safety and liability associated with playgrounds. Again, this just kind of breaks down for you what we talk about when we think about tasks and frequencies. And if you start thinking about all the restrooms in your parks, and you start thinking about playgrounds in your parks, you can start to see how the resources are, can quickly add up, or if you don't have them, how they can quickly evaporate because you're just not able to keep up with the system because you just don't have staffing available to manage things at these task frequencies. So speaking of staffing, along these lines to ensure that you can manage and maintain according to a specific standard, you typically have staffing guidelines that are meant to align with the resources that are needed. Most park systems, 60 to 65% of the operating budget is personnel. It takes people to manage parks. We have not quite advanced to whatever the 23rd century in which we can have drones and robots do this. And I don't anticipate that will happen over the course of anybody's lifetime here on this Zoom call. But a best practice ratio for signature parks level 1 standard is 1 FTE for every 8 to 12 acres. When you think about a level 2 standard, your neighborhood and community parks, it's 1 FTE for every 15 to 20 acres. And then when you start getting into natural area parks, basins, there's a wide variety or a wide range associated with the number of FTEs. And that's 1 for every 50 to 100 acres. An FTE is what we call a full-time equivalent. So in essence, about 2,000 labor hours. It can be a combination of full-time staff, part-time staff, and seasonal, but you need approximately 2,000 labor hours is the equivalent of an FTE for each one of these specific standards. And then if we were to take it even further, these are the amount of labor hours that go into parks, the different types of parks and or athletic fields on a per acre basis. Neighborhood parks, again, I'm just kind of showing the key park classifications within Fresno's system, but 250 to 300 annual labor hours per acre at a level 2 standard. Community parks, 200 to 250 annual labor hours per acre. Regional parks, 200 to 300 annual labor hours per acre. And then athletic fields has a different standard all unto itself, just simply because of the intricacies of managing and maintaining safe and quality athletic fields. That is typically 1 FTE or 2,000 labor hours for every 4 to 6 athletic fields managed and maintained at a level 2 standard. So again, this information is informational in nature. It is the foundation of the, is foundational to the Parks Master Plan that also in turn kind of pointed the city in the direction of recognizing that it was very much underfunded and understaffed to maintain your park system at we'll call just a best practice standard. And again, it is going to take time to get there. As you hire new employees, there's an onboarding process, a training process, a deployment process. And then if you think about the different seasons, there's different tasks for different seasons. It'll take some time. That just because you have staff and you have money to see realistic, feasible, tangible changes to the management and maintenance of your park system is not just going to happen overnight, because there is a learning curve associated with maintaining a large urban complex park system such as what you have in Fresno. So at this point, I think that kind of wraps up my presentation. I'm happy to leave the presentation up or take any questions or concerns, comments, suggestions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I do have a question. Can you go back to the slide where it shows how we are operating at a level 3 right now with our parks managing? So do you have the numbers of how Fresno parks were being managed before the recession? Were we at a level 1, a level 2, or were we always at a level 3?
I think I would probably defer to Mr. Aguirre to answer that question. I don't know that our analysis dove into, I guess, the state of the park maintenance 10 years prior.
Right. Commissioner McCoy, Aaron Aguirre, Parks Department. Mike's right. We did not do a comparison to the previous numbers and levels from the recession. We can probably gather some historical data and see what those crew makeups look like. I know the structure back then was a lot different than the way it's been operated the last roughly 7 to 8 years. So previously done in a completely different fashion than it is nowadays.
Can you say a little bit more about that, Aaron? What does that mean?
So back in I don't have a specific date, but I'm going to say around 2008, right around the recession, it was more of a group of folks would have parks assigned to them. For instance, if I were a maintenance staff lead worker, I may have 3 parks assigned to me, and that's what I worked on. I mowed those parks, I edged those parks, I blew them down, worked on the irrigation, did the field preparation, and so forth. Once that moved over to Public Works back in, I want to say 2012-ish, with the loss of many positions, it had to go to more of a route-based type of operation, since you didn't have the numbers that they previously had. I want to say something around 60 positions were lost during that time. So that crew makeup was shrunk down to a number of like a 4-man crew. That consisted of an operator that would run the big gang mower, the tractor with the implementation on the back. You'd have a bump mower, which is a smaller, 72-inch deck, and then you'd have guys with weed eaters and blowers. So that crew would go around and service about 7-8 parks a day and work through the entire inventory for the week. So you can see the 2 different service levels, pre-recession and then post. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, Aaron, is it safe to say that if you were to make a guess that we were maintaining our parks at a level 2, a level 1 before the recession? Like, what would you?
I would say, oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, if you lost 60 plus positions, I would say you were much closer to a level 2 standard than a level 3.
Right, Commissioner McCoy, that was going to be my kind of comment, that it was probably closer to a level 2.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do any of the Commissioner Cummings, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I'd like to ask specifically, I'm aware that there's a tree canopy assessment going on in the city of Fresno, which should also include the parks and street trees in our neighborhoods. And I'm wondering how that plays into like understanding, I love the numbers associated with maintenance of restrooms, facilities, et cetera. I'd love to see at some point that particular tree canopy assessment, and I'm hoping that this goes into the parks plan for the condition of the trees currently in our parks, and the potential for replacements and also potential for new trees. Definitely we've touched on irrigation, which is critical, and that long-term support of any facility in the park, including trees. But I want to make sure that when we think of parks that we also, like have a good idea about how much that it costs to take care of a tree, to maintain for long-time support. This would also just help our efforts in general, trying to expand the urban tree canopy across the city. So thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just talking and I thought I was unmuted. Thank you, Commissioner Cummings. Commissioner Barraza, I see your hand up.
Yes, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. One, when do we anticipate that the matter of dealing with the what I call depreciation, but it's really a way of accumulating resources to replace parks and the features of the park. When do we envision that will start happening with Measure P funds? That's my first question. And go ahead, and if you'd like to answer that, and if I could ask the second one, you answer then.
City staff want to take a stab at when on the life cycle replacement?
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza, was that a question? When are we bringing that forward?
Yeah, when do you start addressing that? Because in the master plan, there's a lot of discussion about the need for replacing what you have. And we know that the urgency of improving parks, it's so severe that probably that's going to take a little while, but I don't know if you have a sense of anticipation as to when will that happen.
Right. I know in the current master plan that was adopted, there is a section in there, and I don't have the master plan in front of me, but the number that's highlighted there in front of you, the 123 million to 173 million, that's the number you're referring to, I believe, that has the parks and the detailed deferred maintenance and some of the repairs. I believe that's the piece we're working on with WRT to bring kind of the capital piece and the maintenance piece, and that's being developed here in the very near future.
And Commissioner Barraza, this is Scott Moser. To add to Director Aguirre's comments also, in the Measure P capital spending plan, even for this year, you're seeing some of those investments in deferred maintenance and replacements, such as, for example, at the Pillowbow Soccer Complex, the budget includes irrigation, and the soccer field rehabilitation. So that's one of those items that's in the life cycle type of cost that some resources are then being applied to get that back to a closer to new condition.
Thank you. And I know that slowly but surely we're making a dent on the deferred maintenance issue, and our parks are going to be looking more beautiful every day. The second question I have is another area of great concern is public safety of the facilities, the parks. And I don't know where you count that, the cost of making sure that the parks are safe. Is that included in the city police budget, or is it included in the parks budget? Where do we see, how much are you allocating for that need?
I can address that. I'll address this kind of somewhat holistically. Typically, in a city, the public safety or the police budget does support some level of, shall we say, monitoring with a badge. The safe use or utilization by residents of park systems. The other component that can be introduced that I don't believe we have discussed just yet, and I'll explain why in a second, is the development of what we call a ranger system, a park ranger system, that would in part could help supplement public safety and the police department. But here's the one thing that we know, and this is very common sense, that I've talked to many police chiefs across this country, is that when you have something that's neglected and you have something that's not being used because the perception of the infrastructure in your park system is unsafe, or it does not provide a high quality experience, you don't end up having people use parks for the right reasons. You end up with parks being used for the wrong reasons. And then you can see the whole vicious circle associated with it. The park creates a perception that the park is unsafe, not just from an infrastructure standpoint, but the what is going on experience-wise in those parks as well. So they work very hand in hand. I've talked to many police chiefs. The more good eyes that you have on parks, using them for the right reasons, they have a much greater chance of policing themselves. Whereas if you don't have those good eyes using parks for the right reasons, you don't end up with having that kind of built-in public safety component. And again, your system, it kind of starts right now with getting things up to snuff. And doing the life cycle replacement, having better maintenance, providing higher quality experiences, increasing the utilization of your park system. Because the last thing I think the police want to do or have to do is continue to respond to calls in parks or possible calls in parks because somebody's perceiving that it's being used for the wrong reasons.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions, Commissioner Barraza?
Just a question about the park rangers. When will that proposal start being implemented?
I honestly, I don't know that it's something that we incorporated into the first master plan because it felt like that's potentially a recommendation that we can work through as part of the update, unless somebody has a greater update that or a more up-to-date update than I'm aware of at this time.
And Commissioner Barraza, we're working with the Chief of Police, Chief Valderrama, as well as personnel in defining what that role and what those job descriptions need to be. In addition to that, working with other municipalities on their park ranger programs and kind of learning their successes and trying to implement that here with our program as well. So we are developing that and moving forward. And as Mike said, something that we'll incorporate here.
Thank you.
We can provide some standards around which similar to what we talked about in terms of quote unquote FTEs per park acre or managing per park acre. We can provide some standards for that around the ranger system as well.
Thank you. Dr. Apuda, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, could you bring up the slides that showed the FTEs? And thank you. Looking at these guidelines, one of the questions I have, and you may have addressed it and I missed it, is where do we stand right now in terms of our FTEs?
Per acre.
You're absolutely. I don't have that up in front of me right now, but significant deficiencies with regards to staffing levels. I know that there is, and again, Aaron, you could probably help me out a little bit here in terms of how things are moving forward in terms of approval of positions for from City Council, but. Unfortunately, I don't have that number right up in front of me.
Right, and I was thinking about, I think, Francine, it was the presentation you did for us a meeting or so ago around the reorganizing and new positions. I would love, as we move forward, to be able to see where are we now, and as that gets realized, what the change is, so we have a real concrete look at the changes that are happening as a result of Measure P.
We can provide you an update. We did get positions approved, and Aaron can probably do a little more specific which ones were approved, and we've already started the hiring process. So we can probably give you updates maybe on every meeting under the comment period to let you know where we stand. But Aaron, you want to let her know what was approved?
Right.
And then also, and also with the positions, we really are looking at the park attendance and having staff at each park during the entire time they're open. And that also helps with Commissioner Barraza's concern with the safety and kind of who is at the park and what's going on.
Yeah, right, I would love to see where we were and where we are kind of ongoing, because there's so much that it's going to take time to see them realize, to see those little things that show the impact of Measure P would be very encouraging.
So Dr. Apuda, on the positions on the park side, I can tell you we're currently interviewing. We had another interview today, and we'll wrap up for our 3 operations managers who will oversee kind of the additional kind of reorg those 5 areas. In addition to that, we also have interviews set up the following week for additional positions We have appointed a couple positions and filled those vacancies. As Francine mentioned, the major push, the 27 positions, we're on track right now to have most, if not all of those in place by the end of February. So we'll have those on board, but I can definitely get you an updated, sorry, keep moving around the box. I'm not sure where you're, I give you an updated summary as to positions that we've filled out. Again, we do have 41 and we are making great headway on that. So I know Scott on the Public Works side had another 13 and I know they're moving along as well. So it'd be a joint probably summary.
Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Dolan, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Aaron, just to follow up on that quickly, do I understand you to say that of the 60 positions that we lost since 2008, we're hiring back 40 of those? Is
41 on the park side and 13 on the Public Works side.
Okay. So almost getting close to what we were before.
Yes.
That's heartening. Thank you.
Yes, and Commissioner Dolan, this is Scott Mosier. I would add, however, even though we're getting close, the other thing to keep in mind is that we have added inventory to the system since 2008. So we look at, since that time, we look at facilities like Inspiration Park is new since then. Martin Ray Riley, a number of splash pads have been developed, and a number of these facilities do involve a sizable amount of maintenance. So, and I know we don't have that number before you. We'll be following up on kind of staffing, FTEs per acre, and I think we can go back and look at 2008, what that inventory, what that looked like, that staffing versus where we are today. But we've added facilities.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, Scott, if we could just get this simple but useful formula of FTE per acre, right, of our current park inventory and our close to restored numbers. That would be interesting because that'll sort it by this level 1, 2, and 3 right there. A couple of questions, and I apologize if I'm getting into the weeds here, no pun intended. But have we done an energy audit on the parks as a separate subsystem of the city's infrastructure?
Yes, Commissioner Dolan, Scott Mosier, I'll take that one. Within Public Works, we also have a sustainability division. Some of you on the commission may know Ann Cluse. She is our sustainability manager. And under the council's direction, we have both issued an RFQ. We've interviewed consultant teams, or they're actually consultant and contractor teams. The city's taking an approach of kind of evaluate, design, build, and finance with energy efficiency companies. And that includes for the entire park system, a complete energy audit. And the project also will include police and fire facilities. So yes, we anticipate that will involve a lot of things like LED retrofit of lighting, whether it's parking lots, field lighting, community centers, along with a whole host of opportunities to, both address deferred maintenance, improve the quality, and have a project that pays for itself.
Right. Well, good, because that's where I was going. I was going to suggest we're doing a similar exercise right now with our facility, and it's been incredibly helpful, and the payoff is actually surprisingly reasonable on that. Because it would be great if we were going from a deferred maintenance, not just to a preventative, not just to a maintenance cycle, but a preventative maintenance cycle on much of this. Just one last question then, and who is it that generates work orders, requests, et cetera, for repairs and maintenance on the parks facilities? What's the responsibility line there?
Those can come from a number of different outlets. The public through the Fresno app can generate the service request. And again, a service request will then come in for our response and inspection, which at that point then, depending on the finding, could turn into a work order. That work order then is converted by somebody internally in the Parks Department in regards to whether it's a restroom, lighting issue, vandalism, graffiti, things of that nature. And at times, if that comes to the Parks Department, we work closely with Public Works to get that over to their staff if it's, let's say, an irrigation or a tree issue. So those are the various ways that can come in, as well as phone calls.
Do we have set daily, weekly, monthly inspections of each facility by the leads in these departments?
So a lot of those, Commissioner Dolan, are weekly of the supervisors in that area. I think with the CRA model that we're going through, where we have the park attendants, our goal is to have that kind of a daily inspection. That person will be there on a daily basis, walking the park, following up with maybe a cut fence or graffiti or just various vandalism, or, you know, in that case, you start seeing turf drying up. That's an easy call over to Public Works, to the irrigation folks, to have that checked. So the goal would be to have a daily inspection at that point.
Good. And then lastly, I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time here. Commissioner Cummings brought this up, but do we have an arborist on staff or a tree crew that is going to park to park to look at the health of the trees and do pruning, et cetera?
Let Scott tackle that one, since that's his team.
Yes, we do have currently one certified arborist on staff, and we have a second staff member who was certified as an arborist, but her specific job title does not require that, so she let that lapse, but is very, very much an expert in the field. And we actually have a third position. It's in the budget this year, not funded by Measure P, where the city would add another certified arborist. So we are very serious and focused on that effort as well.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dolan. Commissioner Miller, you have questions?
Just a comment, just to thank the staff for putting this presentation together and for a little bit of a focus on maintenance. I really firmly believe that a huge expectation from the public as related to Measure P is that some of our existing facilities be brought up to kind of a better standard. And this presentation kind of pointed out how far we've fallen from what would be considered a professional standard. And having spoken with, staff members over the past 10 years and seeing how overwhelmed they are and how in some categories they've had no chance but to almost give up in terms of irrigation, maintenance, and so forth over the past few years. I think that the staff positions we've been adding would qualify as a good start. But I can tell you from my, professional experience that even today, the average commercially owned property with significant landscaping is going to be spending a large multiple per acre more than what the city has been spending. And I think we still have a long way to go in that category. So I would just encourage everybody to keep a focus on that as we go forward, because if we are expected to promote a lot of new things, new parks and new places, but we still have so far to go to bring up the parks that are already in our community back up to levels that we can be proud of. Anyway, so thank you all for the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. I have one more follow-up question. I think this might go to Aaron. A follow-up question to Commissioner Barraza's question about the park rangers. When will this commission see a presentation on where you guys are at with the park rangers?
We're hoping to have that in early 2022, sometime February or March, as we're right now concentrating on getting the 41 members hired and out in the field to kind of restore the levels of the park, where we are hoping to have that to you by February or March 2022.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any more questions in regards to this presentation?
Chair McCoy, this is Commissioner Parks. If I could ask a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. First, thank you for this presentation. I was looking at it earlier and found it to be very helpful in thinking about park maintenance here in the city. And I'll mention that this, as we were working on Measure P back in 2018, this was the piece that I felt most passionate about. And in talking to people and to piggyback on what Commissioner Miller said, I think there's great expectation that we're going to see, tremendous improvement in the standard of maintenance in our parks. Along those lines, my question is, what consideration has been or will be given to contracting with nonprofit community benefit organizations to help increase the city's capacity to improve the level standard of maintenance? I know that there are nonprofits in our region that have specific expertise that could help contribute to this. So I'm just curious what that might look like, and if that's something that WRT and Pros Consulting could come back to us with some examples or best practices for what that could look like in the future.
One of the things I can address this fairly generally, and then city staff can jump in. But in order to have a really strong, what we would kind of call an adopt a park program, is you kind of have to have your standards in place first and foremost, because otherwise I think those nonprofit organizations can become very disenfranchised and not be very excited about that work. And so once you're able to get the parks back up to snuff, what you're able to do then is have these organizations help what I'll call on the fringes, right? The areas within any given park that could use a little bit more tender loving care. That could be from a horticulture standpoint. It could be from a painting standpoint. It could be from a mulching standpoint. You have to kind of have your standards in place and bring the park up to snuff first, and then be able to incorporate what we kind of call that Adopt a Park program. They are exceptionally successful across this country. The thing that I will put out there is that's an entire management process in and of itself. And you have to ensure that you have not only the resources that are managing those partners, but then you actually have to have park staff out there with them as well. And so again, this would be, I would kind of say, the icing on the cake, so to speak. I think right now we're kind of still in the process of pulling together all our ingredients to bake that cake.
Yeah, and I would agree with Mike's assessment. That was something that early on the Adopt a Park and the Parks Department did have a team that the Public Works Landscape Maintenance Division had out to work with the participants and the adopters on proper techniques and so forth. I think the crews we have do a great job of the mowing and the edging, and I think the Adopt a Park folks did great with the painting and some of the other specialized work. So I think, as Mike was mentioning, kind of a perfect blend of the two. But yeah, that's something that, like Mike mentioned, in some cases we did not have standards truly identified to really allow the program to kind of take off.
And if I may add briefly, those things like some of the painting, or even, for example, some of the flower bed, shrub maintenance and such, those are the items that the mow crews today may have to skip and just simply don't have enough time in making their weekly rotation through the parks. So the city, or in some cases vendors, have really great like large efficient equipment for handling large areas of turf. But there's a lot of the detail work where I agree, a lot of good opportunities for volunteers, nonprofits, or other community organizations to assist. One last piece of information I did want to share with the commission. We talked a little bit about community facilities district maintenance and where new developments have pocket parks and such. that then are CFD funded. They're not general fund, they're not Measure P. And we are spending in excess of $15,000 per acre on that maintenance. So those are maintained at a much more optimal standard. And of course, it's through the CFD special tax assessments the homeowners are paying that they do have that higher quality. Back to Mike's presentation on that, then you're seeing that more at the upper end of level 2, not quite level 1, but you're seeing it at a fairly high level 2 on those facilities. We'd like to get our own city parks up to that point as well.
A quick follow-up question, if I may, just a quick clarifying question. I was sort of thinking of an adopted park program, but I was also wondering about actually contracting and expending Measure P or general fund park dollars with nonprofit organizations. My experience, of course, is on the San Joaquin River Parkway, and I know that, for example, an organization like the San Joaquin River Parkway Trust oftentimes can handle O&M issues at less expense than, say, state parks. And so I was kind of thinking along those lines, if there are community benefit organizations that have staff in place with expertise, are there any scenarios where the city can consider contracting with them to kind of increase the capacity because perhaps it would be less expensive?
I would think yes. I mean, I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we always encourage departments to do or agencies to do is to understand what your cost of service is and what your level of expertise is. Measure P it's a great potential funding source, but it is not the panacea. I mean, you guys haven't hit the lottery, so to speak. And so one of the things that we have to continue to recognize is that there's always good park system from a maintenance perspective. There's always a good blend of the city staff doing the majority of the work. And then, where do you third party contract out? That can be with nonprofits, that can be with the private sector. But it's paramount to understand. And I think one of the exercises by going through what we went through in the master plan and what you're continuing to do right now is you're going to start to really understand what your cost of service is. And once you're able to evaluate what your cost of service is, you then in turn can continue to kind of have this system in place to identify where there are potential cost savings. And there are a number of potential pinch points that cause you to do that. Budget is always one of them. The ability to retain staff, not just to hire staff, but to retain staff so that you don't have kind of an ongoing turnover. So I don't know of what those specific opportunities would be, but we always encourage city staff to understand your cost of service, to fully recognize where there are opportunities to add value through third-party contracting without it costing more, which I think is your point, without it costing more than what it would cost the city to do it itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comments before I come to you, Commissioner Singh, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cummings, go ahead.
Yes, just along the same line of what we were just discussing. I enjoyed the comment there about that Commissioner Parks brought up about the potential for nonprofits being involved in some of that work or the contracting. And I like that the city of Fresno already does a significant amount of contract work with people who are skilled in those areas, like the landscaping that needs to be done. It's also the potential to bring to our community jobs, right? So this is a major investment in general across the board. And there is a trend now, an interest in integrating development with the potential for workforce development within our own community. So I think that it's worth the extra devotion to brainstorming of how we can get people to work in our community. So I appreciate that discussion. And I just wanted to, since nobody really mentioned anything about my comment about the tree canopy assessment that's currently taking place. Scott, could you tell me when that's supposed to be completed, the tree canopy assessment that would also include park trees, isn't that right?
Yes, Commissioner Cummings, thanks for circling back on that. I had just been about to respond, and the conversation changed a bit earlier. But yes, the city has completed, first of all, a tree inventory, and that's now in our GIS. Thankfully, the city was awarded a follow-up grant with CAL FIRE for an urban forest management plan. So we have conducted interviews. We're working to get the firm on board. And then during calendar year 2022, that plan would be prepared and completed.
Okay. And do you see a place for this sort of management plan, or at least with the if we're talking specifically about parks and even street trees, how that could be touched upon by the parks management plan, sort of at least our global vision here about Measure P?
Oh, most definitely. And, you know, trees are something that require good care to remain healthy. Monitoring, you know, selective pruning at certain stages. It's really not viable long-term to kind of go with that level 3 bare bones assessment that just says, hey, let's mow and edge and that's it. And let's hope that the tree limbs don't fall down. Because that's really what a bare bones level 3 effort has consisted of. So this is exciting with CAL FIRE grant and also with that management plan.
In that management plan, you'll stand with any resident on a street or in a park. We can look at Roding Park, for example. There are many very large, old and dying or diseased trees, and that's significant investment. And to me, that's very different than the regular maintenance and care, what you're talking about there, about healthy trees that are functioning. But there in the city of Fresno, we just have this incredible need. We look at the tree from the beginning all the way to the end of the life cycle, and we need to address some of those issues. And I just wanted to bring that forth. So thank you for answering that question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barraza?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to express my support for the concepts being presented by Commissioners Cummings and Parks in terms of the use of nonprofits. That's an excellent idea. And I know that we have a lot on our plate right now, but at some point we need to incorporate the community, because it creates a sense of pride in the community when the community becomes part of the solution. And so I welcome the ideas of at some point making a connection with the nonprofit organizations in our community. And in fact, in the rules or the Measure P text, it states the importance of seeking alternatives, of participation of other agencies. It doesn't have to be nonprofits, it could be private organizations, but more ideas that can generate more costly or cost-effective solutions. And we should continue to search for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to the next workshop. ID number 21-972, process for how the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission can prioritize parks for allocation, recommendations to City Council related to general fund and Measure P budgets. Will staff or WRT please begin the workshop?
Hello, Commission. Peter Winch here. I was giving Aldi a second if you wanted to introduce, but here I am. Glad to be with you, and I've been taking a lot of notes. This discussion of maintenance, I always continue to learn from this as well. So thank you, Mike, for walking through that with everyone. The next item on the agenda is to talk about how we're going to prioritize parks. We have 80 or so existing parks, and we have areas of the city that are parks deficient. Both of these.
You've
Sorry
gone
about that.
mute.
Okay, I'm back, I
You're back.
think.
Do you need permission? Do you need to share your screen?
I do.
All right, 1 second. All right, go for it.
All right. I think everyone's got the screen now?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. So yes, we need to have a strategy to allocate Measure P funds in a way that's defensible, that we feel we can stand on, and it's going to last as a method that we can carry forward year after year. So I want to talk a little bit about our proposed approach to that, get initial feedback. I think our idea is that we would present an approach tonight and come back to you probably at the next meeting. I'm guessing it's the beginning of January, to agree on a more specific approach. We want to follow a similar format to the format that we used for the highest need neighborhoods discussion. So I'll start with just a little bit of grounding in Measure P, and then we'll look at two categories. The two buckets that we're going to be focused on are the existing parks and the new parks. I think we're all familiar with the 5 Measure P buckets, and our focus has been and will continue to be on these two, which are the biggest 2 buckets and the buckets that are focused on parks. The overall concept that we're bringing to you tonight is that the way to identify these priority parks is to start with the basis of information that we have, primarily from the park master plan that was completed and adopted in the beginning of 2018. A lot of really valuable information that we can build on from that document. And those sources, that source is responsible for information that is presented here in the blue circles. So from that work, we have a strong basis to understand the condition of existing parks, where there are access gaps, so the geography of the park system, what community members prioritized during the extensive engagement that was done during that process, and what the flagship parks were that everyone agreed, not everyone agreed, but through that process, there was a consensus around certain parks being the highest priority, that we wanted to make sure that those parks, if no other parks, received high quality attention. Then there's an input having to do with pipeline parks, the projects that the city has already been working on and allocated Measure P money for. And then finally, wanting to bring in current community priorities through an engagement effort that we are intending to start in this week. After we get through this prioritization, the next stage will be to then filter those priority parks through that question of is it in a highest need neighborhood or not? Because in both of these 2 buckets, highest need neighborhoods are an important factor, and there's funding set aside for parks that are in highest need neighborhoods, as well as parks that are not. And then the next stage, and this will come pretty soon, is to actually sort of more hone in on what those priority parks are and what the project should be in those parks. And this is getting a little bit, I think, at a question that Jose asked about when can we start funding life cycle improvements? And I think this is really, we're going to be starting to get to that, because it's about identifying what are the needs in those individual parks. And I want to give Shannon Mulhall an opportunity as well to bring the ADA into focus for us.
Yeah, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me here. My name is Shannon Mulhall, and I serve as the Americans with Disabilities Act Coordinator here at the City of Fresno. And one of the federal requirements for the Americans with Disabilities Act is that we actually do improvement projects. And so the way that Measure P was written and the way that the Parks Master Plan were written really integrate in concepts of improving our existing parks. So you'll notice in that pot of funds for existing parks, there's a call out that those funds can be used to remove barriers to access. And you'll also notice that within the Parks Master Plan, Tier 1 and Tier 2 both prioritize the replacement of inaccessible amenities with accessible amenities and the removal of barriers to access for people with disabilities. So part of what the goal within the community of folks with disabilities is to really integrate those ADA priorities and requirements within this process so that we aren't having to have conflicting plans or priorities in how we're going to address our park services, but that Measure P and the parks priorities really just fold in the accessibility needs for our community of people with disabilities within how we prioritize. And a lot of what the ADA requires is that we look at what unique programs do we have. Do we need to prioritize certain areas because it's the only facility where we have a certain program? Or what's the geographic dispersion? And I know that's part of what you're looking at as well with your highest needs neighborhoods. Is this fair? Is this equitable within our whole community? And so those priorities really do align, and it's something that we want to keep in mind as we're working on the maintenance and deciding what kind of projects we're going to do. Within the ADA's kind of order of prioritization, we kind of go from the outside in. And you'll know that that's kind of how we want to address our parks in general. We look at it from outside and we go, ooh, do I want to walk into that park? Or, ooh, can I even get into that park if you're a person with a disability? And so some of the site elements that we may want to consider prioritizing within our parks that we prioritize may include your parking, making sure that's accessible, your accessible routes, those primary function areas like your sport courts, your community centers, the playgrounds, restrooms and drinking fountains, and then everything else. You know, that's kind of the order of prioritization. Assistant Director Aguirre or Peter, did I hit on everything that you're hoping to related to accessibility here? Great, thank you for that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I think we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in this topic because the focus tonight really is more on the left side of this chart. First of all, identifying the parks, but acknowledging and recognizing that what's coming next is going to be identifying in more detail what the projects are and recognizing that accessibility improvements are going to be folded in to the improvements that we make at our priority parks. So the process that I want to walk through this evening, and we're envisioning, and in fact, we've started, as you can see, we've laid out a table that shows all of the parks, and we have 80. And we've created columns for each of those criteria that I introduced a few minutes ago, in which I now want to walk through in a little bit more detail. But just to get our eyes on the idea of basically a scoring matrix, very similar to what we were working on for the highest need neighborhoods to create a defensible foundation for prioritizing parks. And there's a role for the commission in this, which I want to end with tonight. So just to start with, our 79, I think I said 80, but I guess it's 79 existing parks, all of them with needs, and all of them now with an opportunity to benefit from reinvestment through Measure P. And so one by one, I want to walk through criteria that we think are relevant for allocating Measure P dollars and through the combination of all of these criteria, creating a prioritized list of parks. So the first of these is park condition, and this is a map from the Parks Master Plan. And the parks that are shown in red here are the parks that were found to be in poor condition. So one criterion would be if a park was found to be in poor condition, this should rise to the top of the list. The second category are parks that we identified as lacking a neighborhood amenity. So these are parks where while they may on a map and in our data otherwise, be considered a neighborhood park, they might not actually have the amenities right now that make them function that way. And this is a little bit what I think we're getting at with safety, which is, if the park doesn't have things that are attracting people to use it as a park, it's just not working, and it might be even becoming a drag on the neighborhood if it's not being maintained and also isn't attracting people. So these parks that are shown here as a white circle with a red outline are parks that we found didn't really actually have an adequate neighborhood amenity. So amenitizing those parks then would be potentially a priority for Measure P. The third criterion that we identified are parks that through the master plan process were identified as priorities by community members who participated in that process. And those parks are called out here on this map and in this table. And then the fourth category are flagship parks. And I think the flagship parks were more intentionally made sure to distribute all around the city so that all parts of the city would be served by at least a small number of high quality parks. And then finally, from the Parks Master Plan, understanding where there are areas of the city that actually lack parks right now and prioritizing parks that are adjacent to those access gaps. So what this is a way to recognize that certain parks might be actually effectively serving a larger service area than just their immediate neighborhood because there are areas near them that don't actually have parks right now. So then we move past the Parks Master Plan, and the next criterion is pipeline projects. And these are projects that have already that the city has already initiated and begun down the path of Measure P allocation. These are projects that have likely have political support and have been generated through a process that is both related to and distinct from the overall park system master planning process. And these are projects that have some momentum that need to be carried, that needs to be carried forward. And then finally is the opportunity for us to gather new community input. And Aldi mentioned this in just the public comments part of the meeting. We are intending to launch the website with a survey. And the survey, it's going to be important for all of us to help get the word out. And I think maybe there's more to say about outreach. But this is a critical time for us to get feedback from members of the larger community on what they feel are important park priorities right now. So one of the questions on the survey will be, please name the top 3 parks you'd like to visit in Fresno. Another one, this is not the one that actually should have been focused on here. The one that's important is name 3 parks that you feel are most in need of upgrades. So if we were to put all these together right now, we have all the information, let's say, except for that last category because we haven't launched that survey yet. So that's where you see question marks in this table. But if we were to give equal weighting to each of the other 6 categories, we would right now have the parks that I'm showing on this table rise to the top of the list because these parks, and you can see they're just kind of checking almost all of the boxes. But what we will be wanting to do with you at the next meeting, and I think the purpose of this is to give everyone a chance to reflect on this. We can have a conversation, but we'd love to come back at the next meeting and have another exercise similar to the one that we did for highest need neighborhoods, where we all get a chance, or commissioners all get a chance to indicate where the weighting, which of these factors is most important, and which of these factors might be less important, so that we can really tailor our prioritization around what we feel is most important. So then pivoting from existing parks to identifying, this is now moving over to the second funding bucket for new parks, we would suggest setting up a similar criteria-based exercise to prioritize locations for new parks. And there are actually a smaller number of criteria that we identified in this bucket. And I think the sort of methodology is now you're familiar with it, so I can probably move through it a little bit more quickly. But 2 of these criteria come from the Parks Master Plan. Then there's pipeline projects again, and again, an opportunity for community members to identify their priorities for locations for future parks. So the first of the master plan criteria is the feedback from the stakeholder workshop regarding priority areas for new parks. And you can see where these dots are on the map are places that people identified as being high priority locations. And feedback from the council district community workshops that we heard regarding priority locations for new parks. And these priorities were largely informed by the analysis that was done that we've also shown you in the previous section about park access gaps, because we didn't ask people to vote in a vacuum. We asked people to vote based on this understanding, this recognition that parts of the city are better served by parks than others. And so this map is very colorful and maybe requires a little bit of interpretation. But in a nutshell, the warm colors here, and especially as it gets warmer to red, are areas that are park priority areas, meaning they currently are park deficient or lack access to parks entirely. And they're also higher density areas and maybe meet other criteria that were part of that analysis for being identified as being really park priority areas. So finally, this would also be a criterion for us simply, is this location a priority area for parks based on the current Parks Master Plan? Then again, we have pipeline projects, and these are projects that are already in the funding stream for Measure P, but are not existing parks. These would be new facilities that the city is already beginning to prepare to invest in. And finally, the survey, which we hope to launch later this week, which will ask people, are there any specific areas in town that you feel are not well served by parks? Name the major cross streets. So again, we'd like to come back to you, first getting your feedback this evening on, are these the right criteria and is this the right process? I think that's the fundamental thing to get feedback on, but also then preparing to go through this weighting exercise for new parks. So this is just coming back to the larger process. I know this graphic can be a little bit bewildering. I'm going to try to ground us right here where my cursor is at this commission meeting here in the beginning of December. And we're right now coinciding with this council consideration of highest need neighborhoods. We've already gone through that process as a commission. We intend to be using the rest of the winter, January and February, but perhaps really focused on January, to be identifying park priorities and then beginning to define projects for the current budget and CIP process. So that is where we are. And then as that kind of layers onto a community engagement process, this community-wide engagement, I think what we've been doing this fall has been at the citywide scale, understanding, first of all, what is the process for defining highest need neighborhoods, and now understanding a process for prioritizing specific parks for Measure P funding. And our engagement in this phase has been through this commission and through the workshop that we did together, and now will be through online engagement. And critically, for either of these types of community engagement to succeed in reaching people, outreach, promotion is critical. Then as we go into phase 2, which is coming up very soon, after we've been able to identify priority parks, we are going to want to zero in on a few sites where we will do additional analysis of those park locations and engage those specific communities around potential improvements at those parks. And we intend to do that with virtual workshop, but also pop-up events and an online survey. So that is our vision for engagement. And with that, I would like to hand over the floor, and I look forward to your feedback.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this presentation? Vice Chair Dolan, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for that presentation. Very helpful. I just want to point out something which I'm sure that you all have thought about, but the one issue here is that people do not have a holistic view of the parks in the city writ large, right? So you're basically going to be surveying people on a small area around their own spot and saying, what's your, I mean, it seems like in some ways it's just inherently skewed that people are going to vote for the parks they know are in their neighborhood. And that is fine in as far as it goes, but that may not actually, for all sorts of reasons, we may not be reaching people in other areas, or people may be reluctant to participate or have barriers to participation. And thus we miss real needs. I mean, again, I just say it's just going to be very parochial in terms of people's response to this, which I don't know how you would fix it. And I hate it when people present problems without solutions, but I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah, I guess yeah, it's a great point. I would say two things. One is good engagement requires good outreach, and that would be outreach that reaches as broad of an audience as we can. And second, that we are deliberately putting this in the context, putting community priorities in the context of several other criteria, which are fundamentally based on an understanding of this, of a holistic understanding of the system. Oh, I guess, and then third, there's an opportunity for us to assign weights to each of these criteria. Yeah.
Commissioner Barraza, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the question, my question relates to what I said at the start of the meeting. I noticed that there are projects that are not listed on the pipeline list that the city has already invested in certain sites where master plans have been completed, the CEQA process has been completed. Why are those projects not listed? Thank you for putting that display. On the pipeline projects, I mean, what else has to happen? In fact, and I'm thinking of the projects that filed Proposition 68 applications. They held a series of community meetings, a lot of community support. And so I noticed that you make reference to the master plan that was done, a while back. And maybe those are projects that, well, anyway, that's my question. If there has been already an investment by the city council, that means that that project is some type of a priority. So what's the answer to that question?
And Peter, chime in here, but great question, Commissioner Barraza. And I'm not sure if this will answer it, but I just wanted to clarify as I was listening to you ask the question that pipeline may not mean the same to everybody. So the city and WRT are using this term pipeline for projects that were funded in the FY22 budget so that we can consider, do we need additional funding / they are a priority called out by council members and they've been voted on by the council members and adopted by the mayor in the budget. Shovel ready was another term that you mentioned earlier in the meeting that was used by the council members at the December 2nd meeting, and that is a different term. So I just wanted to clarify for the commission and the public that that term shovel ready could have many definitions. And I know that council asked, what are the shovel ready projects? That could be interpreted many different ways by different individuals, but it is different from what we're calling a pipeline project. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
And when will the survey be? You probably said it. I'm sorry if I didn't catch it. When will that survey be distributed for processing?
Yeah, we're hoping to have the website live today. We've been doing a lot of work with our webmaster to make sure that it's accessible. And that's one of the key things that we didn't want to pull the trigger too soon and then be flat on our heels when it's not accessible to all individuals. So that's something that we're working through. And we've also been working with WRT to make sure that it's in the multiple languages, the survey, and have QR codes and stuff. So we really want to do this the right way, as I know is important to all of you. And so as soon as we have that live, I will send out an update with that link.
And the last question would be, is there anything that this commission can do to add projects to all those, I guess, to the ones that we're discussing?
So I think, and Peter, you again chime in here, but I think that the purpose of this workshop is really to demonstrate a tool that you all can use as you move forward with recommendations in February, right? And so, and when Peter says a holistic approach, being able to take a lot of information that's already either been collected or we're going to collect, and then methodically and draw a nexus to how are you going to make recommendations. So similar to how you all brought the highest needs recommendation to the council with the nexus, right, to the equity factors, this is a tool where you're going to be able to present that same thing. So instead of going to the council and saying, we picked them eeny, meeny, miny, mo based on who had the loudest voice, etc., this is a way to demonstrate that we considered a lot of factors, including the community's voice, and put together recommendations in February.
Can we go to the slide? I believe there was a slide where there was identifying where new parks can be created at open space.
So I've just scrolled through the criteria that we identified for new parks. Community priorities that were identified in the 2018 master plan, and priority areas in that master plan, sort of similar categories there, then pipeline projects, and then the survey question that we haven't launched yet.
Okay, I am very concerned about this. Our park score currently right now is at 97. And residents in low-income neighborhoods do not have access to 13% less park space per person than the city's median and 47% less than those in a high-income neighborhood. And I just don't see any parks or any places in Southwest Fresno or Southeast Fresno that has been identified to where new parks can be built at. So it's just really concerning to me. For the past 5 or 6 years, we have had a park score between 90 to 100. So we're trying to get out of the bottom. So being able to identify open green spaces in South Fresno will be ideal. So just please take that in consideration when you're doing this.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I'm looking at the maps that we're proposing to be used as criteria. And they certainly do show that community members that you're saying something that many community members who participated in the process previously also identified that shortage. And so we're seeing a cluster of park opportunity sites in Southwest and Southeast Fresno, and areas that were identified as high park priority areas as well.
Thank you. By the way, good presentation, and thank you for presenting, Peter.
Thank you.
Do any of our other commissioners have any questions in regards to this presentation?
Chair McCoy, this is Commissioner Parks. I have a quick question, sort of in follow-up to what Commissioner Barraza asked. I'm wondering if there's any way to, for new park prioritization, to incorporate a measurement or information about what work has already been done. I guess this kind of alludes to the shovel-ready question. And the park that's coming to mind is, I think we call it the 40 acres at Peach, which has been waiting for a long time to happen, and I don't know how that would be incorporated into this, even though there has been a lot of work done, to my understanding, on planning, and I suspect that this is the case in other areas as well. So I'm wondering if there's a way to incorporate, like, has planning happened? Has CEQA work been done? You know, that kind of thing, since it's more likely that a park with that level of planning would be quicker to implement. I'm sorry if that was confusing how I asked the question.
No, that wasn't confusing, Commissioner Parks, and thank you for your question. I think it's a great point, and I'm sure there are other examples of, you know, projects or parks that the community has done work on. That is something that you all can take into consideration. You know, you can have that lens on when you go to make priority recommendations in February. So it's something that you can consider. It's also something that can be incorporated into the survey. So once the survey goes live, you will have the option to review those questions. And also, we really want you to share that survey with your networks. And there is an opportunity for you to be able to express, interest in specific park locations. So there's also an opportunity to gather that input there as well.
I have a quick question. When will we know about the awards for the parks who applied for Prop 68 funding?
Commissioner McCoy, we met last week with our representative, and the best we got out of them was any day now. So that seems to be every week the answer we get. So we're hoping this week. But again, we were also hoping the week of Thanksgiving. It was another request we had. So again, we're hoping this week we have some good news.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions in regards to this item?
Madam Chair, I just want to say something real quick. And I have been in contact with the State Park Department, and they told me the same thing, that any week this month we'll have the answer. I also wanted to just make an observation that some of these projects are actually going to be severely impacted by the high definition, depending what the council does. Because, and I don't want to get into the discussion of the 25% percentile versus the 50% percentile, but the 25% percentile would actually exclude a lot of areas, low-income areas, and project sites that will simply not get the priority that being in the high-need area provides. I just wanted to make that observation, because that's another impact that could kill projects. So, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Barraza. I totally agree with you on the point that you just made.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions in regards to this presentation?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in terms of outreach for the survey, how is that going to happen? What methods of outreach are we going to have? Are we going to have flyers sent to folks? Are we going to, send out mailers, or is it going to be like, or I just want to know what type of outreach do we have planned right now?
Great question, Commissioner Singh. And right now we're going to take the approach of similar to how we did outreach for the meeting. So we're going to work with WRT and you all to each play a part in that. So that can be email, and we will make sure to send to the distribution list that I previously mentioned for commissioning. So departments, the previous distribution list for the Parks Master Plan. We also have QR codes, so we'll be able to use those. We can print those out, or we can have those on social media. And we are open to other ideas of outreach. So if you have something in particular that you're thinking would reach your community or your network, we're happy to partner with you on that or support you in those endeavors.
So just to confirm, this survey will be available, outside of just meeting hours, right?
Yes, it will be live on the city's website. We have a page within the city's website dedicated specifically to Measure P. So the links will be in there in English, Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the survey is actually fully translated in each of those languages.
Yep, and so are the QR codes. So if you scan the QR code in your native language, it will take you directly to that survey in that language. You won't have to necessarily deal with English or another language if you don't want to.
I also urge the city to use their platform in regards to like radio ads or media commercials going or billboards or anything like that, because we can only, as a commission, we can only do so much. We can only reach out to our network of residents that we work with, but the city has a much bigger platform. So I would suggest that you guys would do some type of public radio ads or anything like that to bring more awareness to these meetings that are going on and to get more community members involved. Dr. Apuda, you have your hand up.
I do. I love what you were just saying, Madam Chair. And if I would add to that, going on to some of the public service programming and doing interviews and things like that. And there are plenty of us as commissioners that I'm sure John would be willing to go on some of those shows and promote that to the community.
Thank you, Dr. Apuda. Any other comments or questions in regards to this presentation before we move on to the hearings? Well, thank you, WRT, for that presentation. We will now move on to hearings. ID number 21-963, hearing to receive public input allocations related to Measure P and the annual Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding allocations related to Measure P or the Parks Department budget for fiscal year 2022-2023? You will have up to 2 minutes for your comments.
Can we remove the presentation, WRT, please? Thank you.
Thank you. And this is the time where members of the public, if you wish to address the commission, please raise your digital hand. If any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, this is the time to raise your digital hand. This is hearing to receive public input on allocations related to Measure P and annual Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans. All right, our first speaker is Glenna Gamel. All right, Glenna, if you could unmute yourself and lean into the microphone as you're talking.
Okay, on some of the maps when I was looking, I didn't recognize some of the names of the parks that are around, and what areas are they in?
That was a question about what areas these parks are in. She didn't recognize some of the names of the parks.
Yes.
Ma'am, do you have a specific park you were looking for further information on?
Well, as far as I know, I live on the southeast side of town. As far as I know, the only park that I see in this area is close to, I think it's close to Ewing School, and they have off of Olive and Chestnut, I think it is, and they have they have like a little playground, I guess, for little kids. It looks like it's mostly 2 baseball fields, and they did have I guess, a little campfire barbecue thing, but I think somebody took it out because of the homeless going over there. But that's about all they have in that. I don't know if there is other parks on this side of town or not, but some of those I don't recognize the names of them. I know where some of them are, but I didn't recognize a lot of these, so I didn't know where some of them was located.
Ms. Gamel, that park that you referenced is Carosa Park?
I think that's the name of it.
Right. And I'm sorry, I missed your question. My computer kind of cut out.
I'm sorry. I was asking, like, when I saw the maps and stuff, it had like a list of different parks, I guess, throughout Fresno. But there was some on there that I did not recognize, and so I was just kind of wondering where those are located.
Christy, is it appropriate to share a map of the parks for Ms. Gamel?
Sure, if it's something that has previously been shown to the commission and the public.
Christy, what's the best way to connect with Ms. Gamel? Is that something we can do offline to get her that map?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Erin, this is Shannon. If I may, I'm happy to send that over to Glenna. I have direct contact with her.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, let's see if we are there any other members of the public that would like to address council during this hearing to receive public input on allocations? And now's the time to raise your digital hand. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak to the commission, now's the time to raise your digital hand. We are on the hearing to receive public input on allocations. All right, I am not seeing any further hands.
Thank you. Just one suggestion. When we're showing parks, like Vice Chair Dolan said, a lot of our community members are not aware of all the parks that we have in Fresno. Is it possible that we have the council district's numbers next to the park, so our community members that are participating in the meeting will be able to see, like if it's in District 1 or District 7 or District 2. That way they can know which district each park is in. Is that possible?
Yes, Commissioner McCoy, we have those boundary maps. We can set that up. One thing we're waiting on are the redistricting maps. I know that just changed last week or potentially changing, so there may be a week delay behind that, but we do have those maps.
Okay, I just think it'd be helpful for the public when they're viewing presentations like this one.
Sure.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission have any questions or comments regarding allocations related to Measure P or the Parks Department budget for fiscal year 2022 or 2023? Commissioner Barraza?
Yes, Madam Chair. The question is, would there be other opportunities like today for the public to comment on those allocations?
Yeah, Commission Member Barraza, this is Christy Costa. This is going to be a standing item until you complete your task of making your recommendations to City Council.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right. I see no hands going once, no questions.
Chair McCoy, from the chambers, a very, very quick question or maybe a comment. Great to know that this will be a standing item on the agenda, and I just wonder if the city's website specific to Measure P could have something flashy on the front saying, join, this is what we're asking you to do right now, because just to encourage public participation, so to kind of explain what this part of the process is for the public's benefit, if that could be incorporated into the website, that might be helpful.
As Commissioner Parks, we have an area identified on the website that addresses where folks can go to get the agendas, the videos, the presentation materials, as well as register for upcoming meetings. And then we have a few additional tabs. So that's our goal too, to really use that platform as a way to let the public and the commission know what we're up to and that we want them to get involved.
Commissioner Singh, I can't see your hand, but do you have any questions or comments?
I do. Thank you, Chair McCoy. I just wanted to mention some things that I've heard through community conversations and also some things that have previously been brought up in our highest needs meeting that we had. Where we had a lot of community input. I have a lot of community members that have asked me to kind of bring up the fact that there are no parks west of 99, northwest of 99, and so I would like to put that area in the radar for allocations in terms of the Measure P and Parks Department budget to see if we could listen to their needs and see how we can help that community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in regards to this item? All right, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:46 p.m. Thank you all for attending and providing valuable input, and you guys go ahead and enjoy the rest of your evening with your family, and I will see you next time. Good night.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good night.